Hi, this is Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the NPA report. I have a really special guest with me today. You needed to meet her because not only is she a cop, and we're going to get into that, but she drives a really incredible race car with our logo on it, the National Police Association. So, of course, you need to know our very own driver, Officer Rita Goulet. Rita, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we talk about racing, I've got to ask you, why did you become a cop?
Well, I started off as a paramedic. Interesting story. So I was homeless and 18 years old during the events of 9/11. Um, when I found out what happened, all I wanted to do was go over and help. But I'm like, I don't have any skill. I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't want to be in that position again where people needed me and I couldn't help. So I became an EMT, then a paramedic. I did that for a while, and then I realized there was kind of a gap in being a paramedic. You're responding to the scenes after the fact, after the driver has run into the tree or ran into another car and hurt someone, after the domestic violence victim has already been hurt. I wanted to get there before that happened and be able to intervene. So I became a cop.
I love it. I love it. That's such a great story that you wanted to help. And a lot of us say that, right? Oh, I wanted to help. And
But
but that really is well, first of all, that's your story. And I love that. And that's really why people get into law enforcement. It's there's no big power in it. There's none of that.
yeah.
And so I love that story. Now you're in patrol right now, right?
Yes, ma'am. In my previous agency, I was a patrol sergeant in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. But when I really got into racing, I had to move to North Carolina. I also fell in love with my crew chief, who lives in North Carolina. So I started over, and now I'm a patrol officer in Gastonia, North Carolina.
So how did you get into racing? Because of course, for people that don't know, all cops love to drive fast. That's part of why we become cops.
I have never met a cop that didn't like to drive fast.
But you get to do it. You get to do it professionally. Talk about how that started.
Well, so I was a bit of a late bloomer in life. I got kicked out of my house at 16. Long story with some childhood trauma there. And I wound up not getting my driver's license until I was 23 years old. And me and my boyfriend were looking at cars, and I saw this cute little yellow Mazda Miata with a stick shift. And I'm like, I want that one. And he's like, oh, you'll never be able to learn how to drive a stick shift. And of course, I took that as a challenge. And the car became my stress relief. Whenever I'd had a bad call or a bad day, I'd put the top down on the convertible and just go drive. Probably a little faster than the city of Tuscaloosa would have liked, but I would go drive. And as I got more established in my career, and had a little extra money, I bought a second Miata. And my ex-husband was like, what are you going to do with two Miatas? I'm like, I'm going to race one legally. It'll be awesome. So I started with autocross, which is single car. Like, there's only one car on track at the time. And they set up like a cone. Think of it as like EVOC training, where they set up a cone course. Each car runs it, and the fastest car wins. And it's easy on your car because the worst thing you're going to do is hit a cone. Started doing that, loved it, but I got to talk with the other participants. And then I found out there's such a thing as amateur road course racing. So I took that Miata, stripped out the interior, had a roll cage installed, installed the race seat, got everything ready, and started racing it at like local tracks to me, like Barber Motorsports Park, Road Atlanta, those kinds of races. But I'd always dreamed about racing in bigger races. Like I'd be watching NASCAR videos and like, I wish I could do that. But I grew up very poor, and I started very late. And most of those drivers were driving when they were 5 years old, and they come from money. I'm like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. Until an acquaintance of mine said, have you heard about the ARCA racing series? I had not. It's the fourth tier of NASCAR. And he said, oh, you can buy a car for like 25,000. That was a lie. I mean, maybe you could probably buy one for 25,000 in 1992, but That's all it took. I sold my Miata, sold the trailer I used to tow the Miata, sold my gun collection, sold
Wow.
everything I could, and I bought what's called a roller. It was a stock car, but it was a body, tires, and a little bit of suspension. It had no engine, transmission, anything. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought you could just put it together like I did my Miata out of a catalog, out of books, but no, most of the parts on those cars are all custom made. Whew. So I started calling every single team who would answer the phone until I found one team who was willing to work with me. And they helped me turn my car into something I could put on track. Bob and Dick Rahilly over at Raymock Engines. They were amazing. They worked within my price range. I think they probably took a loss on it, honestly, but they did great. I started getting that car out on track, started racing it, and there's all she wrote.
So do you obviously you have a crew chief and stuff, we'll get into that, but do you have that mechanical knowledge to be able to do a lot of the work yourself?
The vast majority of the mechanical stuff falls on my husband because he's the one that knows how to do it. I'd say he does about 80 to 90, if not more, percent of the work on the car. And that gets very stressful for him. It's just a lot of work on one guy. So I'm learning as much as I can. I can take the windshield out. I can help with changing the rear gear. I can work on changing the oil, minor things like I can adjust the cockpit if we have a different driver in it. But no, most of it's him. I'm hoping to learn more though, to take that load off him.
So here you are, you choose a very male dominated profession in law enforcement, then you move into racing and also a very male dominated sport. um Talk about that.
It's not bad in ARCA. There are several female drivers, obviously much more well funded than me, that are in their 20s and they're doing amazing. They're usually fairly friendly. I've never felt picked on or belittled because I'm a middle-aged stepmom getting into the sport for essentially the first time. So that's been great. I haven't experienced a lot of the issues that I thought I would. Honestly, it's been better than my issues with law enforcement in the beginning. So it's
So what do
great.
your coworkers now think about, your police coworkers think about your racing career?
For the most part, they think it's awesome. Usually at our roll call briefing, someone will ask me how the weekend went. I've had a lot of coworkers willing to trade shifts with me so I can actually go to the track because not every race weekend falls on my off weekend. We ran a Gastonia PD logo for a while for recruiting. Overall, they're excited. They like using the car for events, and I'm happy to help them with that.
So how did you, because I know one of the things in racing is you have to have sponsorship, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's one of the things that we see. And as we look at bigger races, lots of sponsors. How did you connect with the National Police Association?
A stroke of luck, which was the luckiest day of my life, I think. Um, this was my first full season running in the E Series. So this was 2 years ago. Um, and we had run out of money. Like we couldn't find any sponsors. We didn't know how we were going to make it to the next race. And I was looking up any police organizations that I thought maybe might give me just enough money to make it to our next race, which was, I want to say Milwaukee. And we didn't have the money to make it. So I was desperately sending Facebook messages to any police organization that I thought I had a shot with. And I sent a message to Ed Hutchinson. He responded. I was so surprised. And he was like, yeah, sure, we'll help you out for the rest of the year. I was like, oh my God, that's the best news ever. And I was so incredibly grateful. And we showed up to his home track, which was IRP in Indianapolis. And he came out. I think a couple of the board members came out. They had a great time and they've been on board ever since. And we could not be racing without them. It's been amazing.
And that's
And
the
I,
thing. we are incredibly proud of you and what you do, and it's fun to watch you with the National Police Association logo,
That's
and
awesome.
you know, it's I one of the things I love that you do is you always seem to try and find the locals that are working, you know, security at the track or
Yes.
whatever, and take pictures with them. How does local law enforcement respond when you show up as this race car driver and you tell them, hey, I'm also a cop?
They're usually pretty impressed. It's led to some very interesting conversations and some recruitment efforts for my local department.
Absolutely. Now, I
It's
got to
fun.
ask you, since becoming a race car driver, have you been in any pursuits at work?
Unfortunately, no. My city Gastonia's pursuit policy is rather restrictive, so I just haven't had the opportunity. But I sure get to calls fast.
I bet you do. So we've been going through this, you know, really 4 years of the vilification and the demonization of the American law enforcement officer. And you know, here you are, A, you're a cop, and B, you're out traveling the country driving a race car that is unabashedly pro police. What is that like for you?
I've gotten a lot more support than you would think from fans attending the race. Usually they'll come up to me and be like, we'll have a conversation about me being a cop and a conversation about the NPA. And they're like, yeah, we're glad to see this. And every once in a while, I'll run into someone who has a negative opinion of police. And I'll try to use that as an opportunity to, change hearts and minds and kind of find out what they don't like about the police, their local police department, or correct misunderstandings they might have. I find that one of the issues we have in law enforcement is that we don't explain stuff to people. And I know, like, in the moment when you've got someone at gunpoint, you can't explain it. But afterwards, when you unhandcuff them because you realize they weren't your suspect, taking 30 seconds to be like, hey, you match the description of this guy we were looking for. You're not the guy we're looking for. Sorry about that. Have a nice day. Can go so far into helping with police citizen interactions. And that's something I try to do at work. And I've done a lot of explaining things to people at the track who are like, well, I don't know why this cop did this or did that. And I'm like, well, let me offer you a different perspective. And I think it's helped one person at a time.
That, you know, and you're absolutely right, you know, that one person at a time, that's one of the reasons the National Police Association exists, is to try to get people to understand and to remember, honestly, that the law enforcement profession is you know, we're the people trying to, you know, keep you safe, keep your
Yeah.
neighborhoods, you know, safe, all of that. You know, and so that's what, you know, that's one of the reasons we so appreciate you, because you're a positive role model for young people. You're fantastic at interacting with the public, and like you said, explaining things. Now you I'm guessing talk to the media quite a bit too, and I'm sure they all want to know about, you know, being a female cop and being a race car driver.
Oh,
What
yeah.
kind of media questions do you get?
Um, Usually kind of background story, why I became a cop. Um, every once in a while I'll get some interesting questions that I have to stop and think about. I think one person asked me um who my favorite race car driver was, and that took a minute to figure decide on. I said myself.
I like that answer. That's what
A
it
little
should be.
confidence.
Um, Police work's dangerous. We all know that, right? You
It
know, you
is.
go to dangerous calls all the time. What's more dangerous, driving a race car or being a patrol cop?
Being a patrol officer, the race car never intends to kill me. I mean, honestly, the race car doesn't want to hurt me. The race car isn't sitting there on a traffic stop thinking about all the ways they can run or attack me or anything. The race car is just the race car. And while it's dangerous, it's a danger I can control. You can't control always what happens out on the street. It's dependent on what the suspect does. So being a cop, I feel, is more dangerous.
Now that race car has a lot of, I would imagine, a lot of protections. I mean, your whole
Oh, yeah.
cockpit, right? Is talk about that because I don't think people understand that. People like me who are very naive about the racing industry. I look at the speeds that you go and the crashes and things, and I don't understand how you guys walk away from those crashes.
I have been more sore from crashing my personal car than I ever have from crashing a car on the racetrack. Um, so first off, we have an aluminum seat that's mounted to the floor as well as to the back roll cage. In that seat, I have a custom built, but like a custom poured seat insert that fits me exactly. So there's no wiggle room. And then we have a 7-point harness. So over the shoulders, over the waist, and then it's connected to the floor at 3 points. So you don't ride up or down. Even if the car flips, you're not going to move. And oh boy, it is tight. My husband tightens up the harness for me, and I can't move. In addition to that, we have a net on the driver's side window so your arm can't accidentally come out. There's padding on any roll bar that could possibly touch me. And I've got a helmet, and then I've got a Hans device. So if I come to a sudden stop, my neck only goes about that far. It doesn't like go all the way. So there's a lot. On top of that, I'm wearing a fireproof suit, fireproof gloves, fireproof boots, fireproof undergarments, and a fireproof headstock under my helmet. So it's sometimes it feels like you're preparing for a NASA mission when you're getting all buckled up and ready to go.
Very different than when you're getting ready to go on patrol, right? All we have
Oh
is
yeah.
body armor and a regular seatbelt,
Yep.
and that's pretty much it. That's that's extraordinary. Um, being a race car driver, and again, I don't think a lot of people know this. It's well, racing, of course, is a sport, but you have to be really athletic to be a race car driver, right? You're not just sitting there, drive. Talk
It is.
about talk
Oh,
about the preparation for that.
I do a lot of cardio, a lot of work on my shoulder and back because those are the muscles you use for the steering wheel. Um, this sounds silly, but what I'll do is in the summer, I won't run the AC in my patrol car so I can get used to my heat tolerance building up because it is hot. I think it gets to be about 130 degrees in the cockpit.
Rita
It's
Goulet and the number
a lot of people
31.
who don't know about racing think it's
Good to
just
have
like
Rob
getting in
and
your
Rita with
personal
us.
car
Of course,
and driving
Rita
around in circles
is
for 100 laps. But
an active
the G
member
forces,
of
the
the
strain on your body, the lack
law
of air
enforcement community.
conditioning, having to be constantly mentally like
Nationalpolice.org.
zoomed in the entire time with no breaks. It's a lot,
Extraordinary.
but it's so
Absolutely.
fun.
Tim
What's
got
the
in this car
fastest you've
pretty
ever
much day
gone?
and night. If you follow Tim on social
Not as
media,
fast
he
as I'd have
is
liked to.
got to
I
be a
think
night
we hit
owl.
maybe
He is working on
160
this
during Daytona
almost
testing,
24 hours a day.
if memory serves.
Motorsports and Chevrolet.
That's one of the things as you continue to get more attention, um, and especially doing what you do for a living and with the National Police Association, visibility and the sponsorship. I think that's one of the things that we're excited to see is that people are watching because now again this last 4 years of a media narrative that somehow law enforcement is the problem. We know, and because you're out there all the time, that in reality the vast majority of the public supports us.
They're just
And
quiet.
so, who wouldn't want to get behind a race car driver who is also a working cop?
Yeah. I,
And plus, I guess you must have, do you get to talk to young girls who are just looking at you like,
yes.
oh my God, you're my hero, right?
That is one of my favorite parts is I will get little girls come up to the car in their little princess dresses and they are just so enamored with the fact that a girl can drive a race car. And I'll always take the time to talk to them and be like, you can do anything you want to do. Race a race car, climb the Denali, you could do anything. And it's fun. That's
Yeah.
a one very fun part of my job.
How many races do you get to participate in a year?
Usually between 6 to 8. Um, a lot of it depends on funding. A lot of it depends on my work schedule right now. Unfortunately, like most departments, Gastonia PD is very understaffed. So I can't actually most of the time I can't actually take a day off. I have to find someone to swap shifts with me. And that kind of limits what races I can and can't do. But I shoot for between 6 to 10 a year on a good year. And we're thinking about maybe getting a cheaper car to run on weekends where there's not ARCA. Maybe like a pavement street stock or something. That would be very inexpensive to run, which we would have the NPA's logo on, of course. And then we'd run it like at our local tracks. That way I get more seat time and I can improve, but it's not as expensive as ARCA. So we're thinking about a few different things.
Well, I know
Yep.
I know you have a long racing career ahead of you. You also have a long law enforcement career ahead
Oh, yeah.
of you. So you have fantastic social media. You're really good about all that. Tell people where they can find you, how they can support you.
Sure, yeah. So I have a Facebook page under Racing Cop, and that's my Rita Goulet racing page. The team has a Facebook page under Rise Motorsports. And I'd say our Facebook is probably the most active, but we also have an Instagram and a Twitter for Rita Goulet Racing and for Rise Motorsports. And for Rita Goulet Racing, it'll be under Racing Cop. I really adopted that one.
Yeah, I love that's I love your racing cop persona, and you always have great pictures up and things like that. I got to tell you, Rita, we are so appreciative of what you do, how you represent the law enforcement profession, how you represent the National Police Association, and we're grateful you spent a little time with us today. If you would like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Join the National Police Association in supporting our brave men and women in blue. Every day they put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, progressive prosecutors, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremists like George Soros and woke companies like Amazon, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and Google, to name a few. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating just $5 to keep us in the fight. Together, we can win. That is National